Nostalgic America in 1965 with a 17-year-old girl and boy. I was alone once again, for Joanne's mother had taken a wonderful offer to become a high school principal in Nebraska. They'd left right away, needing a few months to find a home and get settled in during the summer. I didn't quite know what to do, so I let the void fill me for a week, which doesn't fill. So I let the waves of memories sweep over me, those swells never to be forgotten. I no longer spoke to the fates. It had only been a kind of a plaything for me, a way to speak at large, to express myself. If there were fates, which there weren't, they'd at least been kind enough to variegate the many colors and shades of my life into a stained glass window that now had many glorious, wonderful panes, all of them still shining, although shattered. Beverly, a gymnast, a year behind her brother, Kurt, and I, had asked me to take her to the prom a few months ago, but I'd said that I couldn't because of Patricia. I felt bad, although I don't really know why I should have. I gave her a call. I don't know why. Perhaps it is that if someone liked me, then the relationship is already partway along. However, I knew her from before. She was, well, pleasant, but she said she'd like to go out, but she had a busy schedule. Plus her mother and stepfather had been watching her like hawks after she had gotten into some kind of unnamed trouble. Well, they knew me, for I'd often been there with Kurt playing pool. Still, it didn't look good. I could use my parents' second car, so I went over to see Kurt, parking around the corner from Gunderson on Roosevelt Road, a busy road. After a while, Beverly and I snuck out. I drove down Roosevelt Road, soon looking in my rearview mirror. There was Bob, her stepfather, driving about 3 cars back. Boy, was he good or what? He's following us.
He does that, but he never admits to it.
I guess. Ditch him. This may not end well for you, but just for fun. I drove around a big truck and then pulled a quick right, hoping for a block out from the truck. Bob didn't see us turn, but I'd noted that the truck now had its left turn signal on and was moving toward the left lane. No good. Bob will see that we're no longer there up ahead.
What will he do?
He'll take the next right on the next block, then drive fast and try to pick us up again, even see us right away if he makes a lucky guess.
So what now?
We have to turn around, a 3-point turn. No driveways, time is short. I performed it as quickly as possible. We were back at Roosevelt. However, it was clear to cross, and so we did, and thereby had entered Berwyn.
He won't look here?
No, he won't, at least not yet, and it's hard to get across. We were lucky.
And if we hadn't been lucky?
We would have ended up taking a right on Roosevelt, the same way we were headed, and that wouldn't have been the best thing to do.
But we still would have gone into Berwyn when possible.
Yeah.
Know anyone in Berwyn?
No, not really, but I went to a party there once.
How was it?
All the girls had beehive hairdos and they were chubby.
Are we safe now?
No. Bob will comb the South Oak Park area, at least the parts we could have reached, as blocked by the expressway, and then he will figure out that we're in Berwyn. Cicero. That's between Berwyn and Chicago, and in a direction away from Bob, which will widen the distance. Our best course.
He'll give up?
Probably.
Isn't Cicero full of mobsters and bad guys?
Well, yes. We'll have something to eat at one of their joints. Beverly looked scared. I added, they like customers. It occurred to me that this kind of escaping, while somewhat exciting now, might tend to get old rather quickly. You had to know when to fold them. We drove for a while. We're here. This inn was Al Capone's old headquarters, a refuge far from his rivals. The North Sider had hoped to lure him near a window here, which didn't happen. However, they still shot up the whole place with Tommy machine guns.
Let's go home, okay?
Next time we had a walking date, and the real chemistry was evident. My friend Joe had since gone on from whomever to go with Elena, a Spanish girl who he'd just walked up to in school, having told her that she looked pretty.
Way to go, Joe.
Joe and Elena picked up Beverly and I one day somewhere as planned, and we were driving down Roosevelt toward Harlem, and we got into a minor crash. We got out. We were all okay. A police car arrived. Wouldn't you know it, of all the fluke happenings, Beverly's mother and her stepfather Bob happened to be driving by a minute later.
Unbelievable.
Beverly had to get in the car with them and go home, and well, that was the end of that for a while. Beverly and I would keep going out for a while until I went off to college. We'd walk with Pat Hickey and his girlfriend. She was Friday night. I could fill another book with her. It was a most excellent time. High school was over. There was my job driving a truck all around 2 days a week, and there was, I don't know, sports, and there was summer, and time for a break before starting college? Romance wasn't everything, was it? High school was over. There was my job driving a truck all around 2 days a week, and there was, I don't know, sports, and there was summer, and give it up, I thought. Just relax. You're all out of miracles. Nostalgic America in 1965 with a 17-year-old girl and a boy. I was reading a book on evolution, one of my favorite supplemental studies, then put it down to ponder life. Life in the past was no picnic, but now we had it relatively easy, so to speak, and in the future we might look back upon these times as the good old days. Some did that now, referring to the beginnings of the 1900s to the half-century mark, but those were also the days of polio and influenza, the First World War, the Depression, and the Second World War. I considered the evolutionary eras, thankful that I wasn't around for those millions and even billions of years. Well, though, those times had to have been that long climb ever trying to spell success. By and large, though, the world was still a mess, but this was mostly in lands further away, but for some areas of Chicago. There was a tree of life, one that had branching upon branchings from a common ancestor. All was one, and the same for all the plants and flora. We humans were as organic as anything else. I pondered life some more. Why do people so naturally eventually get married and have kids and responsibilities? Because they wanted to? Because they chose to? Well, yes, they chose to. But a lot of this was probably nature speaking and choosing through them. But that was still them, though. It gave me a philosophical headache. Now was all we had, whatever our stage of life, and now I was happily and peacefully doing nothing. In the old days, people even went away for the whole summer, as if they hadn't had a care in the world for what went on without them back home, going up north to a cabin, boating, swimming, fishing, hiking, and sitting out on the porch. We couldn't afford a vacation this year, even for a week, but we didn't mind. Life was good, the family was good, and some of the neighbors were good. We never got bored. Well, I still had work and games, but there was plenty of time left over to do not much at all. I'd taken a high school course in Fortran, an early computer language, and had then and there decided that computers would be my future in college and in work. Hope they get rid of Fortran statements like go to 30, where 30 is the label of a section of code, and let an alphabetic name be used, for 30 doesn't tell one anything about what that code does. My eyes first lit on Lois years ago, long before I knew that she lived very near to Joe Gaynor, and that Lanny and Norm knew her too. And I will never forget the first sight of her glory. Lois was walking out of the basement of the Lutheran Elementary School after roller skating. She was beautiful and gleaming with her fluffy red hair, smiling, laughing, and graceful. I froze, possibly because I was stunned, but perhaps also so I could take in all of her astounding presence. I obtained Joe's blessing and went over to ring Lois's doorbell. Thankfully, she answered the door, and I asked her out to the motorcycle races in Downers Grove that I had gone to before with Penny, and with Janice Igarto on my street, who had taught me ear-kissing in the parking lot of Parky's hot dog and hamburger place. But she was too young to keep going out with. The same had been for another Janice across the street from the first Janice. The second Janice and I just happened to walk near each other one evening, and she suggested that we go to the park and sit on a bench. You can't make this stuff up. Presently, I've been with a third Janice for over 30 years. At the park, she began kissing me wildly. What a beautiful shock. We stayed there quite a while until she said she had to get home, a hint to me that either she was young or her parents were strict. I never ran into her again. Very strange, even though she lived but 3 houses down the block, which I guess was just as well, for I found out that she was 5 years younger than me. Anyway, Lois quickly said yes, and I picked her up in a few hours. The races were exciting, and on the way home, I parked near a mausoleum on First Avenue and Roosevelt Road that I had scouted out beforehand. It would turn out to be appropriate for another reason found out later. We held each other and kissed for a long time, amid the quietude of the dead in the cemetery nearby. I didn't try to touch her intimately, for she was all dressed up and buttoned up in white, and well, it was only our first date. The next day, Ruth Bard came over and said that Lois had wondered why I hadn't touched her. I replied that I was a gentleman. She spread all over town. I had been redeemed. Two days later, Lois called me at home and said that her parents were out and so I could come over. I ran over there with my best sneakers on, flying by 8 avenues. No need to park a vehicle outside her house. It seemed that stealth was called for. Lois told me that her parents ran a funeral home in a regular house on Wisconsin Avenue, which backyard we could see from the alley behind Pat Hickey's house. We often wondered why we never saw anyone living there, why it was so dead, and now I knew. We played on her sofa for quite a while, which would make Ruth Bard happy. Sorry, readers, I lost my notes about this. I don't really know, but I know that the relationship didn't continue. We didn't call each other, although everything was perfect and nothing terrible had happened. I could guess at some maybes, but none of them make any sense. She, like Beverly, was still in high school. Lucille might be coming back next year. I give up. It's inexplicable and it still confounds me. There's no excuse that will do, Zippo, and so it is that I must have had a rare but ultimate brain lapse, which can only be called stupidity or laziness or both, but surely a huge mistake. Well, at least I had caught up to the 8th grade girl who was the startling vision years ago that is still etched in my mind. It was still summer, 1965. I had graduated high school. Many of my high school classmates would go off to war sometime in the near future, at least those who were already 18. Nostalgic America in 1965 with an 18-year-old girl and boy. I still had a summer job of delivering kegs of nuts and bolts from A&H Fasteners around Chicago to the far-flung suburbs and even to Indiana. I knew all the shortcuts, and so I often had some time left over at the end of the workday, plus I'd had lunch on the run, so I'd usually stall around somewhere in my neighborhood as a work-home transition kind of thing. I was driving past Maple Park in the company's red pickup truck when I noted a ball rolling across the road, it having come from way further over in the park. I stopped, parked, picked it up, and brought it over to where it had likely come from a bunch of kids that looked like they were related. There I discovered the 2 older sisters, Catherine and Trish, along with their 8 younger and assorted siblings. They had enough for a ball team unto themselves. Catherine talked with me for quite a while. They were from Forest Park, were Irish, and Catherine was to be a sophomore at another University of Illinois, in Central Illinois, at Urbana, and her sister Trish was to be a junior there. So they were ahead of me in school, and thus had escaped my radar that couldn't see the past. I was just out of high school, a college freshman to be, plus their high school would have been Proviso East. Well, it was a wonderful talk, except for something about that they'd been sexually abused when younger by their drinking father, and their not wanting to be back here. But I had to get the truck back to work. Here's a story I wrote way later on, for a class reunion in 1990, which I didn't go to, a taste of memory. Upon arriving at St. Bernardine's Catholic Grammar School each day, I would always stop at Bill and Betty's little store, which was just across the street, and buy 2 honey-dipped donuts to eat in the classroom after Mass. This was a privilege for those saintly students who had fasted and received Holy Communion. For me, as a 6th grade boy, It was the ultimate treat, considering that the staying in one-room school day provided little other diversion until lunchtime. Oh, how delicious those donuts tasted to a growing boy who had starved since dinner the night before, fasting all night and then sitting through a seemingly never-ending mass during which special prayers were said for nearly everyone's grandparents and sick relatives. But it was well worth the wait, for breakfast never tasted better than it did for us, the famished Holy of Holies. Imagine eating right there in school during class, without even having to sneak in the bites, such as one had to do with candy snacks later in the day during hunger attacks. And out there, cooling, on the windowsill, in all its glory, was our free chocolate milk, there only for the deserving, the healthful drink that washed down the honeyed donut. All in all, it was a morning feast truly fitting for us young Christian warriors. To get milk, one needed only to have the foresight to sign up the day before, and of course to sit through a Latin Mass, most of which time was spent either in looking over all the minute details of the person just ahead or in nudging someone's shoe or lunchbox along the floor until it had quite disappeared. Of course, to kill even more time, one could pretend to climb the wall buttresses barehanded and to maneuver among the ceiling arches, sliding down the lamp wires and such, until rudely bumped back into reality by the nun sitting behind, the nun with eagle eyes that could detect the slightest lack of attention. Or one also could look and see which of the girls had forgotten their veils by the sorry napkin and handkerchief assortment draped upon their heads. Yes, a Mass was a long and difficult time to suffer through, especially the endless periods of kneeling, but it was the tasty dreams of milk and honey donuts that carried me through. And now and then I'd catch a whiff from my donut bag of the breakfast, which everyone knew meant breaking the fast. I also had, from Bill and Betty's store, some of those penny candy sheets, the long, narrow ones with about 30 rows of 3 dots of candy across. The kind of candy that you could never seem to cleanly remove, and so you always had to ingest some of the paper lining as well. And 2, some brand new packages of the latest baseball card series. I would slowly and secretly open them later in class at some boring moment, which came often, and hope against hope for a Mickey Mantle card, which everyone knew appeared but rarely. Me, I was a real collector, using my own allowance to buy the cards, not like some other kids whose mothers gave them enough money to buy an entire box of baseball card packs. Yes, all this, plus more could be had from Bill and Betty's store. It almost made going to school worthwhile. Bill and Betty were both quite old, and I can see now, looking back, why they were often crabby and impatient with all the little angels and near saints who would crowd into the store each morning to lay their pennies on the counter. But to me then, it was a kind of rare freedom to roam the store. Old Bill never said or heard very much, wearing a hearing aid and often pretending that he was deaf. But old Betty, she would always ask us what we were doing in the back of the store and yell at us to stop loitering and to either buy something or go to school. Looking longingly at the popsicles, I would move on, always remembering the time when they cost only 4 cents instead of 5, still upset at the price increase that broke my budget. Once there was a time when our teacher would bribe us each with a free popsicle just for going to communion, but the principal soon put a stop to that, after seeing the entire 6th grade class dining on popsicles day after day, probably reasoning that holiness was not something that could be bought. Yes, those were the days of luxury. Since our new 6th grade teacher was a lay teacher, not a nun, we had many such adventures. I remember one time when she marched the entire class over to my house on Sunday morning because I had missed choir and Mass, since I had slept in my backyard tent with my friend and had stayed up all night and now needed my sleep. Luckily, we saw them coming, and so we went in the back door of the house and right on out the front door. And we never stopped running for blocks, although it was hard to run and laugh at the same time. Then, one week, while buying my communion breakfast, I noted that old Bill was missing behind the counter, having been replaced there by his young granddaughter, Patricia. So I asked where he might be. Sick, she told me. Very sick. But in a week or so, Old Bill was back, although he was moving much slower than before, and so I started secretly staring at it. Some months later, a sign was put up in the door saying that the store would be closed for a week, and within a few days, I heard that Old Bill had died, and we students, of course, lit numerous votive candles for him in church, obtaining at the same time the pleasure of playing with fire. We prayed for his salvation and were, of course, very penitent and remorseful for ever having caused him any trouble in his last days. Taking no chances, I, as always, invoked an act of contrition so as to wipe clean my slate by gaining a plenary indulgence, which, amazingly, was said to work even for murderers. After a week without donuts, I was a nervous wreck and often had severe withdrawal pains after Mass during breakfast time, but survived somehow on some Hostess cupcakes and some imitation donuts that my mother bought at the supermarket. But these donuts just weren't the same. The store reopened as scheduled, old Betty running it alone. As I prepared for school that morning, I brought extra money for a special treat. Some of those wax bottles that contained, as now I see it, mere colored water. But then, as I thought as a boy, some sort of elixir of the gods. I bought donuts too, and I swear to this day that there has never been a better donut made. Probably because back then, the neighborhood bakeries made them fresh at 4 a.m. without preservatives. Many years have passed between this and then, and through those years my tastes have somehow strayed away from donuts to more exotic foods, even to fruits and vegetables. And so it was that I had long forgotten about the old school store until just recently, when I found myself at Dunkin' Donuts ordering a freshly baked, honey-dipped donut. As I bit into one, the taste of my grammar school memories came rushing back. All of them apparently contained right there inside of that donut, and I have so written them down just as they came to me. So there I was, stopped, and sitting still on my motorcycle in front of the little store. Did I really need to go around to the side or the back and go up there to meet some strange Irish father? A little kid came over after a bit. I recognized him from the park.
Hey kid, can you go tell Catherine I'm here?
The kid didn't say anything, but he quickly ran off and around the side of the building. Catherine came out and hopped on.
Quick, go. My mother doesn't want me riding on these things.
I motorcycled to the far end of Forest Park, which was just down a ways after the big swimming pool, where there was a park just before Maywood. She had been holding on for dear life.
I've never been on one of these. Exciting?
Yeah, with the rumbling, the vibrations, and the air rushing by. What can I do for you, ma'am?
It's like I'm on vacation right here in my own hometown.
Enjoying it?
Not really. I've been free and now I'm not so much.
I'm kind of on vacation too, between high school and college. My last hurrah.
But you work.
Yeah, I drive all over the place, from strange Chicago warehouses to a nowhere land way out the other way. But not every day. More like every other day on average.
Can I come with sometimes?
Sure, I can pick you up around 9 or 9:30 tomorrow. There's an extra run this week. I have to load the truck first. You're really bored, aren't you?
That's for sure, and at college too, but it's great compared to living back here.
You're very good looking.
So maybe the boys are scared of me.
I'm not scared, and those boys will come around eventually.
I'm only here for the summer and the school breaks.
Life still has to get lived.
Okay.
Sure. Ice cream? We walked over to a stand at the edge of the park. Another rerun, I thought, but a good one. We sat down to eat, all because I had picked up a ball. We stood up, looking face to face. Somehow a kiss happened. She rode with me on my truck route several days a week. She turned out to be even better than I'd expected, on a par with the best, minus the literary aspect. Soon her older sister Trish rode with us too, and then Trish began kissing me too. Two girlfriends at once. Fate was overflowing my cup. I had a really old van that I'd secretly bought, although I didn't really need it. Plus, I always had to add oil to it. Nor did I drive it much, for I didn't want to have to pay the insurance on it, but perhaps I would in the winter. So it just sat near an auto repair place. I only had to pay $5 rent a month to have it parked there, which was a steal. I camped in there sometimes. Dan Maltese carpeted it, and I fixed up the back of it some more. And so now we had a love retreat on the nights that were not too warm. Well, this was a part of what summer was for, and it was my last one before college. I would probably have to get additional jobs in the summers to come. Life was going to become extra serious. Soon, Catherine's sister Trish came to the van with us too, making for a romantic threesome. What was I doing? Well, it wasn't illegal or anything. It was just unusual. The summer was soon halfway through. I would have married Catherine, I suppose, and she me if possible, with some more time to consider it, perhaps, in our transient haze of the moment. Or someday if the locales and the ages and the times had been a bit different in some other reality. But here, and in between, we'd be in different universities. That arrangement would be prone to failure. There was still a lot of life to be lived at both ends. No complaints, though. It didn't fail, though, and it would go on several years through college until I graduated college and took a job at IBM. Another book, a loving long one, but the Army eventually took me. Summer ended. They headed back to school, which was hundreds of miles away. I put all their stuff in the van and drove them. We unloaded and then camped for a day, waiting for the dorms to open. On the way back, the van blew its engine. Oh well, it was old. I hitchhiked back to Chicago and then took a transit train. I began college at the University of Illinois Circle campus, majoring in information engineering in the field of computer science. Vietnam would have to wait. I would be 18 soon. It was September 1965. I was really alone now, for everyone commuted to this university and then went home. Plus, there were but a few women in my engineering and science classes, and they looked and acted like they ate circuits for breakfast. It didn't look like anything new romantically was going to happen, and it didn't, nor did it matter, for I had to apply myself. There were still the sporadic visits from Penny and the Kennedy sister to tide me over. My glory days appeared to be over. I had to study hard and work too. The whole College of Engineering was sterile. I got to run computer programs on one of the first mainframes. I learned calculus and other great things. I joined a fraternity. They were a bunch of drunks. I gave it up. My real love was the liberal arts, but they would not likely pay the bills in life, so they had to be pursued on a personal basis. They put on the back burner too. In a feat of artistry, I managed to arrange all my courses to be on Monday, Wednesday, and Friday, which gave me Tuesdays and Thursdays off to drive a truck around, but for some science labs that I didn't go to. Nothing fell from the sky onto me but rain, and then leaves, followed by snow. I had no local romantic life, and winter had come on early and hard, but it seemed I'd had enough memories for a lifetime. I applied myself in school, for that had to be done to get off to a good start. Anyone good would have to find me, as it had happened the last 2 times, with Joanne, or by accident, as with Catherine. The winter was cold. I learned assembler language and PL1, which was a high-level language along with file systems, searches, sorts, and other numerical analyses. I liked it. I had aptitude for it. I'd taken a Fortran course in high school, and now Fortran was even on its way out. Catherine wrote me a letter in early December. It was full of sorries. They wouldn't be coming back for the month-long winter break. Well, I'd known that. It was either because of their father, or because they'd obtained boyfriends, or both. Well, all in all, I'd been blessed again. I'd turned 18, and so I had to register with the draft board, and then the year turned to 1966. I had a college draft deferment. My draft lottery number was 106. Surely they would get to that number if the war was still going on when I graduated, although I might get through 6 months or more thereafter. These numbers went from 1 to 365, the days of the year. One of my friends had number 363, and so he was as safe as he could be. No use worrying about it, though. Life had already gotten more serious from college, For now, though, I was partway through the winter break. Nothing came my way but more snow. Only icicles tried to fall on me. I worked on some computer programming functions that would allow me to program at an even higher level, these obviating any low-level errors that could have crept in. Some of my friends were already getting drafted into the army. Not a good time to go, I thought. My school break was now about halfway through. More snow was forecast for the evening. Well, nothing to do but stay home. Not a thing was going to happen, just like during the last 4 months, much less a miracle. I had gotten used to it. It also seemed important that I not be with anyone at this time, for I had a hope fluttering around with the butterflies in my empty heart. Nostalgic America in 1966 with an 18-year-old girl and boy. Love Redux. On a blustery night, Sharon Dalton and Rick O'Kane came knocking on my door. I invited them in, and we went down to the basement to the sofa near the pool table. What brings you here?
Our feet.
Actually, we drove.
Are you seeing anyone?
No, not really. Should I be?
Yes.
Do you have someone for me to go with?
Yes.
Is her name Lucille?
Yes.
Today is her birthday, isn't it?
Yes.
She's free to do as she pleases now.
True.
Tell her to get back here.
1 or 2 days.
How come you're not saying much?
She wants to be the one to tell you everything.
She'll be living with her aunt?
Yes.
And finishing her last year of high school.
No, she's done. She took summer school.
You're telling me too much, perhaps?
Yeah.
Let's go up and use my phone.
She's already on the road. She was coming regardless. She'll be calling me partway through at some point.
2 days on the road?
Yeah, maybe they moved way out west. She's on a bus.
I only had to wait a day. Lucille came knocking at my door, ringing the bell, even. Everyone jumped up and went to the door and stood around, for I had told them I was having a surprise visitor, but that I could say no more. She was even more beautiful, her features even sharper. She'd grown a few inches. She came in, shook the snow off, and kissed me in front of everyone. They stood astonished, for they had never seen or heard of her. She looked like a snow elf.
I just fell from the sky, off of Santa's sleigh. I'm the miracle of Christmas past, present, and future. I'm the ghost of summer of 1960. I told Patrick I might be back in 5 years if I could be, if he was free, which he is, and so here I am, back where I belong, to sing our song that was frozen in time. Oh dear, it's been so very long. I'm sorry to shock you all like this.
She took a bow. They all clapped. A dead world had just sparkled itself into life. My family evaporated away. Lucille and I sat on the sofa.
Hello, Patrick.
I'm Patrick again?
Yes, because Sharon's boyfriend is named Rick.
Our moment frozen in time has just been defrosted.
And may it ever warm our hearts.
If I survive the war, I'd love to marry you.
Will do, and I do.
I never dared to hope.
Nor me.
But we did, somewhere deep down.
Yeah.
Happy New Year, 1966.
Let's celebrate.
We'll spend the weekend at the Oak Park Arms.
Excellent. We'll bring our hands, lips, and legs, too.
Let's go out for a walk in the snow. We went out into a steady snowfall.
I haven't seen snow for years. And now they're falling all around. Our names have been written in the stars.
What did you see?
I took business courses. Downtown, I suppose. I'm going to find a job next week. Although I had some good times out there. And the city here. But I like my mother's side of the family better. My father is fine. Minus my stepmother, who left for a while. And then we moved to Oregon. I learned to shoot and ride, sow and harvest, fish and swim in Wyoming. And farms. Valleys, fields. I saw mountains and study the rest of the time, and then take courses.
I drive a truck filled with nuts, screws, and bolts 2 days a week.
We're on our way, Patrick, toward forever.
Welcome home.
At last, I'm home at last.
A bright star shining in the dead of winter.
An explosion to rock your world.
A bolt from the blue.
A jolt to the ice.
The Titanic has risen in sails once again.
Nothing can stop us.
Are you safe from the draft while in college, Patrick? Yes, and my degree takes 4.5 years, so I even have some extra time.
I got a job, though, in an office on Canal Street. I'm not going to college, I can't afford it.
Good going.
And everything great just keeps on going. One thing leads to another.
You came through for us.
Love is the best thing to come through for.
A year passed. Lucille lived with her aunt and I lived with my family. That's the best we could do, but it was enough. Our relationship was like an extended honeymoon, which was an optimal state of being. Perhaps life would always be like that. No kids, no big worries. My friend Joe got drafted and ended up as a helicopter door gunner and crew chief. He sent letters detailing the horrors of war.
One time, a bullet passed between my fingers and killed the soldier sitting next to me. Another time, we just landed to pick up some soldiers and got attacked on the ground, which was the worst place. We all got out and engaged the enemy in a firefight, which we were losing, but then help arrived from another chopper.
Another year passed. Joe wasn't sure he was going to make it, but he returned alive and unharmed from the war and told us many harrowing stories, putting us on the edges of our seats. People who I'd been with in high school were getting killed, right and left. We went to several funerals. The war showed no signs of letting up. 2 more years passed. Now it was February 1970. The US was in a recession, and I had but one job offer. But it was the one I wanted, at IBM in Poughkeepsie, New York. I would start in February or March. Lucille was to come with me. It's difficult to write about this time of my life. The fates took my Lucille from me, along with her aunt and cousin. The fire had started in the lamp store beneath their apartment in the middle of the night. They all died of smoke inhalation. They were all asleep and never woke up. They never even knew their lives had ended. We had had many years together. A lot happened, but my brevity and near silence of description in this section is a tribute to her. Replied little Lulu. You were one of a kind. Life is never fair, of course. Why was I still alive while Lucille, Karen, and many of my friends had perished? Time would tell. I'd likely be in the army within a year.